everyone, welcome to another video. In today's video I'm going to be showing you how to apply this beautiful wallpaper that you see behind me. But this isn't just any ordinary tutorial because this is specifically a renter-friendly tutorial, and my hope is that you'll actually be able to reuse this wallpaper once you're ready to move, or you want to put it somewhere else. In the past, I've used peel and stick wallpaper, which I know is a pretty popular alternative. I personally found that it did damage the walls. Now the company was nice and they refunded me, but it was kind of a hassle and kind of defeated the purpose of removable wallpaper. Traditionally, you would use this wallpaper with like a true wallpaper paste. But for today's tutorial, we're going to be using liquid starch. Starch keeps clothes very structured and it kind of prevents dirt from clinging into the fiber, and the starch kind of acts as a very weak adhesive. It kind of turns it into a giant sticky note. So I'm going to kind of talk you through it here based on the experience. I wanted to have it sit for a few months to make sure it wouldn't just like all of a sudden roll over. But the wallpaper has stayed. It looks great. I think it has settled really nicely. Now the way you reactivate starch is with some water. So I'll probably make a tutorial for once I actually take this wallpaper down, but I'm very confident that by using a steamer or a wet sponge that I can reactivate it and peel it off the wall in one strip and not rip it. So with that being said, let's get into the tutorial. I'm so excited. I feel like this technique can open up a lot of possibilities for people who really want to upgrade their apartment. So here are some things that you are for sure going to need. Enough wallpaper. You want to make sure it's paste the wall wallpaper. This is what this tutorial is for. If you need a tutorial for another kind of wallpaper, let me know. You're going to need a big container of starch. The starch actually goes pretty quickly. So for this whole back wall, I'll show you, I used a whole jug of starch. Another thing you're going to need for sure is a glue syringe and a very fine detailed paintbrush, an X-Acto knife for trimming around like outlets and things like that, a cutting mat, a T-square ruler to cut a perfect straight edge, scissors, a measuring tape. I didn't have a measuring tape long enough for my wall, so I just used a piece of string and kind of measured against that to make sure I was cutting my strips long enough. Oh, you're also going to need a deep fiber paint roller. You just want it to be really cushiony and spongy, and you're going to need a paint tray. That's where you're going to put your starch in. Step one to this project is cutting all of your strips in advance. I have level 2 wallpaper here because it's got a pattern that has to match. It's not a wallpaper that I can just cut and this will always just match up. There are vines that kind of connected over multiple panels, and so it was really important that I pre-cut all of my strips first. This will save you so much headache in the long run. It's kind of like with cooking, you want to get all your ingredients prepped. So let's prep our wallpaper. I'm going to use the wallpaper as like a measuring tool to measure across, and I'm going to cut, I believe it's 8 strips. This is going to be a workout. I'm not gonna lie, I was sore after I did this. You'll see I changed outfits because while you can do this project all in one day, your body will thank you if you spread it out into at least 2. So that's what you're gonna do. You're gonna pre-cut all your strips first. Make sure they match up next to each other if that's the type of wallpaper that you have. Some tips for cutting the strips are you want to use a self-healing mat and a T-square ruler so that you get a perfectly straight line, and an X-Acto knife or a box cutter, whatever you feel more comfortable using to cut that straight line. Scissors are tough because you can't quite get super in line with the T-square. If you want to use them, you can always overshot with the scissors and then trim with the X-Acto knife later. Once you've prepped all your strips, you just want to make sure you want to prep your wall. So prepping your wall, just make sure it's clean. If it's super dusty, maybe take a towel or a paper towel to just get any excess dust off. But that's it. You don't have to do any sanding, any painting, anything like that. You just want to start off with a clean wall. Step 3 is going to be pouring the starch into that paint tray with the roller and heavily saturating it, especially if you have a really thick, high quality wallpaper like the one I'm using. You're gonna need a lot of starch power for it to actually stick. I was trying to estimate like how much I actually needed, and it was a lot. The first strip I applied was the hardest because I just kept holding back on how much starch I should be using. but when I used like a ton, like so much starch, like it was dripping down the wall, that was the right amount. You kind of do each strip in 2 parts. You start with the top half, making sure the top half is nice and secure, and then you kind of lift up the bottom half and apply the starch there. That way you have like a strong base before you kind of manipulate the bottom half of the wallpaper. So you're gonna do that for all strips. You're gonna do 1 strip at a time, 1 piece at a time, and go slow, because obviously once the starch dries, it's a little bit more tricky to manipulate. But there were a few times where I messed up and I just peeled it off the wall, and I was able to give it another try. So take your time. The starch is very flexible. It doesn't dry super quickly. So you have time to kind of slide it up on the wall to make sure it's flush up against the next strip and flush up against the ceiling and the molding. So I really loved working with starch for that reason. The second reason I loved working with it is because, like I said, I did not do this all in one day. All I had to do was rinse off the brush. It wasn't like tacky with glue or with paint. It was deactivated with water, so it came right off the brush. So once you have applied all of your strips, you'll just want to do a little like look around. You want to trim any bottoms, edges, or tops. I found it to be pretty easy. It's just time consuming and kind of takes a lot of your body. So I recommend putting on a good podcast or audiobook and just going to town on this DIY project. Once you kind of finish all the panels, you want to do what I call like a little beauty check. Sometimes when the starch dries, it might bubble in some areas, so that's where that glue syringe will come in handy. I'll use the glue syringe and just kind of squirt it into the behind the panel and use my hands to smooth it out. Now, I know if you're watching this and you're like a professional wallpaper applier or home renovator, you're gonna think this is like too scrappy, that I should be using more tools, which you're right. I probably should have been using like, I don't know what they're called, a wallpaper smoother, but I found using my hands was good enough for me. But again, this is like the bare bones tutorial. I'm sure there's a more souped up tutorial that you'll need more gadgets for. But yeah, and then I just kind of touched it up from there, and that was it. It stayed perfectly put. I haven't had to reapply it. It hasn't peeled off. It's looked exactly how it did when I finished the project. And yeah, I know for a fact that it's not going to damage the walls, because like I said, there were a few times where I peeled it off and it came off really easy. It kind of just turned it into a giant sticky note. So it has enough grip, but it's not going to ruin my walls. And like I said, starch reactivates with water, so for whatever reason you apply too much starch and you really can't yank it off, just take a wet towel or sponge and you should be able to reactivate it and kind of slide it right off. But yeah, I hope this tutorial is helpful for you. I hope if you have some wallpaper sitting around and you want to put it up but you've been too scared to, that you give this tutorial a try, because it was, I mean, it looks so great, and I'm so glad that I'll be able to kind of preserve the wallpaper for the next place I live or another project. And what's fun is that if you pick a really cute wallpaper, you can use the scraps to make bookmarks or cards or other, pieces of stationery. But all in all, it was a really fun project. I wish I had done it sooner. I'll make a video when I have to take it down. It should not damage your walls if you do it right. Now, I do want to say that I did try to add wallpaper to another corner of my apartment, and I changed my mind and I just peeled it off. It was really easy, but I did notice like a thin film on the wall. But I have a suspicion that when I need to move, if I take a wet towel, that'll come right off. And if not, it's so hardly noticeable that I feel like once they paint over it, it's not going to be an issue. But like I said, I'll make another video once I actually remove this thing. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. And if you want to use this for a wallpaper you don't care about and you aren't, you don't want to salvage it, I still think this is a great technique to turn any unpasted wallpaper into removable wallpaper. But yeah, I hope this inspires you to do that makeover that you've been putting off, because it really is worth it. Every time I see it, it just makes me so happy. So yeah, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.